Hello and welcome to the Physical Preparation Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Robertson, and today we're going to be talking about 5 reasons that you might be feeling stuck in your fitness career. Now, I just want to throw this out there right out of the gate. If you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling lost, if you don't feel like you're making the progress that you would like in your career, this is totally normal, my friend. And I've talked to so many different coaches over the years. Sometimes they are brand new coaches that are just getting into the industry. Sometimes there are people that have been around for a couple years, but maybe kind of losing their way, or they don't know what the next steps are. All the way up to people that have been doing this 10, 15, 20 years, people that own their own businesses that you would consider to be really like some of the foremost leaders in our industry. There are all times where we feel lost, where we don't feel like we're making progress. And so I realize this is very unguru-like of me because, the best gurus have all the answers and they never have any self-doubt or any issues. But man, I've been doing this 24 years, my friend, and I have issues. I've had issues along the way. When I was first getting started, my first gig was working at Ball State University. I was in that Division I athletic weight room. And if you would have asked me in 2001, 2002, Mike, what are you going to do for your entire career? I'd say, I'm going to be a Division I strength coach. But, the universe had a funny way of kind of proving to me, no, actually, you're not. Because not only could I not get a job, I couldn't even get an interview for a job. So, right out of the gate, I'm like, this kind of sucks. I feel stuck. I go to my first real job. I'm working in Fort Wayne. And I knew I didn't want to be a physical therapist. I wasn't really, at least at that point in time, I was not prepared to work with, injured individuals or people that were rehabbing injuries. And what was my first job? I'm working with people that are doing, rehab, that are dealing with these injuries, shoulders, knees, backs. So again, I kind of felt stuck. I felt like that wasn't the right spot for me. I moved to Indianapolis, 2005 to 2008. Now, at least I'm in a personal training environment, but I'm working out of people's homes. And a lot of these people, they are super wealthy. They have the means to train, but they're not super excited to train. They were just very apathetic. And not all of them, don't get me wrong. But a lot of them, a trainer was just something you had because you were wealthy and you wanted to take care of your fitness. But I knew that wasn't the thing for me. I knew like, hey, I can help these people, but they don't really see all of the value that I could bring to them. And so even when we started iFast, even when I've started iFast, there's been points along the way where I'm like, man, I'm just not where I want to be yet. So today it's going to be like you're getting a one-on-one private coaching call or mentorship meeting with yours truly. We're going to sit down. We're going to find at least 5 reasons. Now, I'm not going to tell you this is all the reasons, but we're going to talk about 5 reasons that you might be feeling stuck or that you're not progressing like you would like within the fitness industry. So we're going to break down some of the biggest reasons that coaches feel stuck today. And then most importantly, we're not just going to rant about it or complain about it. We're going to talk about real strategies that you can use to start moving your career forward again. So I'm just going to ask this as you go through this episode, if there's something that really hits home for you, if you really like the episode, please help me out, man. Just share it. Could be, a family member. It could be a friend, a colleague, a fellow fitness person that you associate with or that you enjoy hanging out with or talking to. But we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to jump into these 5 reasons that you might be feeling stuck in your fitness career. All right, my friend, let's dive in. Reason number 1, we're just going straight for the gusto right out of the gate. You're not making enough money. So let's just say the common one first, right? This is a hard industry to make money in. I had a really interesting discussion the other day. I was sitting down with one of the dads who, his daughter is on the same soccer team as mine. And so he starts asking about the gym and he's been great. He's been sending his daughter to iFast to work with me for speed camp. And he said, I was actually a trainer for a while myself. And so we start going back and forth. And I was like, well, what made you stop? He's like, the hours. And I knew the place that he had worked at, they put in incredibly long hours. They worked a split shift. So they'd work in the morning, train midday, and they'd come back and work in the afternoon. It was really hard. But he said the biggest thing was that just wasn't enough money. And so when we start talking about money, let's just throw this out there first. First off, in most cases, you are making exactly what the market has determined you're worth in your current situation. Now, I understand this is totally unpopular, but I'm going to say it again. In most cases, you are making exactly what the market has determined you're worth in your current situation. And I'm going to put this in the show notes later on. So if you didn't listen to this podcast that I did with Andy and Luca a while back, I'm going to put it in there because I know Andy has some real thoughts on this. But really, this comes down to two things. If you're not making enough money, either number one, you actually are underpaid based on the value you provide, which absolutely can happen. Or number two, you actually overvalue what you bring to the table, and you need to increase your skill sets and your value to the team. So let's talk about both of those, because I have worked with individuals, I've consulted for individuals, and I know there are times myself where I have been underpaid based on the value that I brought to a company or to a business. So if this is really you, right, and you got to go in guns blazing when you do this. If this is really you, you need to make a list of all the things that you bring to the table and show your boss your value. Okay, so let's say you work for a big box gym, and you think you're making $30 an hour, you think you're worth 35 or 40 or whatever the case may be. Here's what you need to know. You need to know your boss's numbers, right? Like how much are they charging? What are their margins? All of this stuff. You need to know what it means to them as a business owner or manager, right? It can't just be about you. Like, I feel like I'm worth more. That doesn't fly. You got to explain to them in their numbers, in their rationale, from their perspective, why you are worth more, right? Are you getting more clients in the door? Are you converting more sessions? Are you retaining clients for longer periods of time? Because trust me, guys, if you go in there and it's all wishy-washy, I feel this, I think that, it's not going to fly, and you're going to miss out on your shot. You only get one shot at this, kind of like Eminem, right? So if you want to do this, you have got to walk in prepared. You've got to know all of your numbers. You've got to know what you've done. You got to know what you bring to the table, and give them a real understanding as to how you help them move their business in the right direction. And keep in mind here too, I think sometimes there's this weird discord between employees and employers. And so one of the things I always try and remember is that I've been on both sides of this equation. I've been an employee where I'm working for somebody else, and I've been an employer where I am employing others. And so you have to understand everybody wants to make a little bit more, right? Everybody. If you're an employee, you want to make a little bit more. If you're an employer, you want to make a little bit more. So what you can't do is say, well, this guy charges this and I only make this, therefore I deserve more. Well, but if you don't know their numbers and their margins, and you don't know what kind of profit they're actually taking out of that, then you don't know if there's extra left over for you. All right. So this also works if you are self-employed as well. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example here. And I just call this the Great Reset. So at iFast years ago, we put this policy in place where we said, hey, if you start with us, we will never raise your rates. As long as you keep a consistent membership with us, we'll never increase your rates. And we actually started this way back in 2008. And so to give you an idea, for 2008, you could train with us once a week for $159 a month. So basically $40 a session. And we got into, I don't know when it was, 2016, 2017, somewhere in that range, and started to realize, hey, this sounds great on paper, but this just doesn't work in reality. Because while those clients not only were paying the same rate, the value that we were giving them continued to get better and better and better, because we got better as a staff. We wrote better programs. We coached better sessions. We offered better services. But on top of all that, not only was our value growing, but our costs were going up as well. Because, if you run a business, hey, rent doesn't stay the same for a decade. Your cost of doing business go up. So, hey man, you still got to pay insurance. That's probably going to go up. Your HVAC bills, all of the things that you pay for that allow you to run a successful business go up. So we never gave ourselves that cushion early on. So we had to do what we called the Great Reset. And I just told all of our clients, I said, look, I hate to do this, but anybody that's on that rate, here's what I need you to be at. And if you want to walk away right now, you absolutely can. I actually stole this from Mark Fisher, by the way, and I'll make sure I link to his show as well. But we just said, hey, look, we feel like we're absolutely giving you this level of service. And so we hate to do this, but this is where we need you to get. And I think we went from like 159. That was a worst case. There were very few people that were on that low of a rate, but we got them up to the current day rate of 229. And did we lose one or two people? Yes. But by and large, everybody went up with that. And then what we said was, okay, here going forward, we're going to say every year we're going to reevaluate and we're going to raise our rates, maybe somewhere between $4 and $6 per month per year. And so that allowed us to kind of reset and recalibrate our rates going forward. And I've had to do this too, right? There's been a lot of years where I've tried to meet people where they're at. And ultimately, I've just had to set on one pricing structure. Hey, these are my rates. I've got a private one-on-one rate. I've got a group rate, and I got a semi-private rate. So if you're by yourself, here's your rate. If there's two of you, here's your rate. If you're in a small group, here's your rate. Very simple, very easy, but it just helps. It helps everybody understand when there's one clear pricing structure involved. So anyway, kind of a little tangent there, but if you're underpaid, you got to be able to demonstrate either to your boss or to your clients and your athletes, whoever you're serving, the value that you bring to the table. Now, the other side of this, and unfortunately, this is what happens more often than not with young coaches, is that you overvalue yourself, right? And you understand, hey, I am working hard. I am trying to get better. But let's be honest here. If you've only been doing this a year or two, you probably don't deserve to make what a 5 or 10-year industry vet does. Okay, so if you overvalue yourself, you need to work on leveling up your skill sets as a trainer or coach. And there's so many ways you can do this, right? It can be all of the stuff that you do around your sessions. It could be dialing in your assessment process. If you do your own assessment, really lock that in and really help your clients and your athletes connect the dots with, hey, this is what the assessment does. This is what I take away from it. This is how it's going to help you get better results. The strong assessment process really sets the stage for a great training relationship. So it could be dialing in your assessment. You could be writing better programs. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. You could coach and cue more effectively. But those are some of the hard skills associated with this. You have to remember at the end of the day that all of these things have to translate to more clients, more sales, better retention, right? At the end of the day, every smart business owner is looking at their numbers. And so if they can very clearly say, hey, look, you want to make more, but you're bringing in $5,000 of training revenue a month versus this person who's bringing $8,000 or $9,000 or $10,000 in training revenue every month, it's very clear who is worth more to the business. So it keeps coming back to knowing your own numbers, knowing their numbers, and then figuring out how you can grow your own skill sets to drive your numbers up. So the recap here is very simple. You're making what the market has determined you're worth, for right or for wrong. So if you don't like it, right, if you're underpaid or undervalued, you need to have a reset, either with your boss, with the people you serve. Somewhere in there has to be a reset to try and get things back to where you feel like even keel should be. And if not, you got to work to increase your value going forward. Nobody likes to hear that. But especially if you're just getting started, your value to a company isn't probably as high as you'd like, right? That's not to say it's not going to go up, but it's not as high as you'd like right now. Perfect. Number 2, you aren't getting results because your programs aren't getting results. So going back to the early days of Mike Robertson, so 2000 to 2005, those first 2 years, I'm living my double life. I'm in the research lab during the day, and then in the afternoon, I come in and I'm working with the athletes, men's volleyball, women's volleyball, football, powerlifting team, women's soccer. So it's a really unique training environment, right? You got generally healthy athletes. They are performing at a high level. And I mean, like our women's volleyball team was bordering on the top 25 at this point in time. They were one of my primary teams. Men's volleyball was in the top 10 nationally. We had some really fun athletes to work with. Now imagine I'm going from that environment where it's really about training and pushing the envelope. And I was powerlifting at the time too, right? We're pushing the envelope. We're trying to get stronger. So I go from there to Fort Wayne. And now, I'm powerlifting, but all of the people I'm working with, dodgy knees, dodgy backs, broken shoulders. So you can imagine if I try and take these programs for these healthy athletes that are trying to improve their performance and then immediately adopt it and make it work in a rehab environment, that's not going to work well. The moral of the story here is very simple. What gets you results with one group or demographic does not guarantee success with another. So there's a really strong message here, and you have to remember this. The client drives the programming. I'll say it again. The client drives the programming, not vice versa. So if you have a client that comes in and they say, hey, I want to lose weight, but I've got this, dodgy shoulder, you got to know certain upper body exercises aren't going to be in the mix. You're probably not going to put a barbell on their back when they back squat because that's going to negatively impact their shoulder health. Okay. So when we start writing these programs, there's a couple questions that we need to ask, right? And we could really dive into the weeds here, but I want to give you a couple just to get you started. Okay. Question number one you have to ask is, are you writing a program that's congruent with their goals? Okay, and I'm going to give you a great example of when I did not do this. So let's go back to our time in Fort Wayne, and I'm doing a lot of rehab, but I had one guy in particular. He was very focused on aesthetics and fat loss, right? He was a business owner, type A guy, a little bit on the huskier side, and he said, Mike, I want to lose some body fat. And so what do I put him on? Well, me and all of my infinite wisdom, I put him on a powerlifting program. Right. And I tried to convince myself at this point in time that I wasn't lost in the sauce of powerlifting. But man, I put this guy on a powerlifting program, right? He was back squatting, he was bench pressing, he was deadlifting, and it wasn't really congruent with what he wanted, right? He added some size and he added some strength and he felt good, but it wasn't necessarily the program that he really needed to achieve his goal. Okay. So number one, I have this honest reflection with yourself of, are you writing a program that's congruent with their goals? If not, that needs to be addressed. And then you got to figure out, okay, if I don't know how to write this style of program, I need to find somebody who is an expert at it. When I think of fat loss, I think of Alan Cosgrove. When I think about hypertrophy, I think of, maybe like a Jason Brown. I know he does some functional hypertrophy stuff. I think of, some of the bodybuilding type guys. I know Cody McBroom does some cool stuff with hypertrophy type training. I don't do a ton of that. So this is where you might have to do your own research a little bit. When we're talking about strength, man, maybe it's, looking at some of the Eastern European powerlifting type stuff. Maybe it's West Side. There's so many different strategies that you can use out there. Maybe you're training more in the longevity gen pop, which is, I think, where a lot of us end up leaning, or a lot of us who run businesses end up landing, because that demographic tends to help us pay the bills. But at the end of the day, look, shameless plug here, you can always buy my complete coach cert where I literally break down program design, the X's and O's and the neurometabolic continuum, and I give you actual programs you can swipe and deploy. So you can go and do something like that. But that's the first thing you have to do. You have to figure out, is my program congruent with the client's goals? Now, second, and this is one I find a lot of people not considering, you have to ask yourself, are they ready for the style of program they want to do? Now, here's what I mean by that. When we used to do boot camp style programming at iFast, this was a big venture for us. This was a big kind of like fork in the road, because we'd always done semi-private training. And semi-private involved you come in, you get an assessment, you get a custom programming, you work in a small group. So there's lots of hands-on and time for coaching. Well, the second we go from that model to incorporating a little bit more large group bootcamp style model, this is a whole different ballgame. And so one of the things that we found was we would run this class every Saturday, 10 a.m. called Learn to Burn. And so we'd run a boot camp at 9, they would do their thing, and then these new people that wanted to join boot camp would come in at 10. And so they would sit in and we'd do a little talk, and then we'd basically take them through a movement screen, right? We watch them squat and hinge and lunge and push up. And every now and then we'd find one person where they're just a train wreck, right? Like they're an injury waiting to happen. And so a lot of times what we'd have to do is, all these other people would be like, okay, you're good. We'll see you next Tuesday, whatever, 5 p.m. And then that one person, we'd have to pull them aside in a lot of cases and just say, hey, look, I don't know if you're aware of this, but you've got a lot of physical restrictions to the point where you probably wouldn't be a good fit in boot camp. And so what I'd like to offer you, I realize you want to get to boot camp. That would be my goal for you. But what I'd like to offer you is come in for our semi-private trial. Just do it for a month, right? Normally it is whatever, $400 or $500. We'll give it to you for $199. That way we get some time. We can work through some stuff. We can teach you how to move a little bit better. And then when you're done with that, you can either continue with semi-private if you like it, or we can move you into boot camp if you feel like we're ready to make that plunge at that point in time. And so that's where, it's kind of a tougher conversation, but we never had an issue with that because most people felt like, oh, wow, this person really cares. They want to see me succeed. And so just know and understand some people aren't ready for it. Another example was my powerlifting partner back in the day, Lil Stevie. When Lil Stevie first came into the gym, he was one of Lance's friends. And so Lance brings Stevie in and he's like, yeah, he's a big kid. He wants to power lift. I think he'd be a great addition in the gym. And so Stevie comes in and I just let him and Lance train the first day and I'm kind of watching. And all I can think is this kid's going to break himself if he wants to power lift, right? Like he was deadlifting, his back's all turtled over. I mean, he's 19, so he's just strong and, resilient. But I was like, this dude's going to get hurt if he doesn't get some coaching and he doesn't get some mentoring. And so I basically told Steve, hey, look, man, you can come train in my gym. I wasn't doing open gym at the time. I said, I'll give you the open gym rate. You can train. You can even train with me and train with our little group. But here's the thing. You've got to do what I ask you to do without question for the next 3 months. And he was great. He did it. And so for the next 3 months, we worked on recapturing his mobility, getting his body to move right. Lo and behold, at the end of the 3 months, not only was he moving and feeling better, he hadn't touched a barbell. I let him deadlift, and he literally tripled his old max without deadlifting over the last 3 months. And so that's where sometimes you have to have these discussions of like, hey, look, I understand you want to do this goal, but before we get there, we have to do these 2 or 3 things first to kind of reset or rebuild your foundation. Okay, so that's kind of a secondary question you need to ask is, are they ready for the style of program they want to do? And then the final question, if your programs aren't getting results, you have to ask yourself, is the work really getting done? And so I just want to throw this out there because I realize there's lots of reasons people choose to work with us more or less, right? For some people, it's just a time-based thing. For some people, it's a money-based thing. But, if you're a trainer or a coach, here's the easiest question I'm going to ask you all day. Would you rather train somebody 3 times a week or would you rather train somebody 1 time per week? If you want somebody to get results, would you have them there 3 times a week or would you have them there 1 time per week? And so this is where you have to kind of understand, hey, sometimes it's not the program. Sometimes it's the person working the program, or it's you resetting the expectation of the person that's working the program. So you got to ask yourself, are they working hard outside of the gym, right? If they're only with you once a week, what are they doing outside? Are they getting those other sessions in? Are they pushing themselves when they are? If they're, say, a body comp client, are they doing the things nutritionally? Are they doing the things from a recovery perspective to make sure that they're getting the results? Because look, if you train body comp clients, you just got to understand that you could write the best program known to man. If your client is not doing what they need from a nutritional perspective, they're not going to see the results, period. Fat loss is like 90% nutrition. So if they don't have the nutrition side buttoned up, you're not going to get the changes that you want. Okay, so a couple random questions there, but that should help you fill in the gap. The moral of the story here is simple. You got to use client-driven programming, right? The program has to meet the client where they're at, right? You don't take the program and funnel it to a client. You take the client and you funnel them into the appropriate program. Second, you got to make sure they're ready for the program that they're doing. If not, there may need to be some prep work to get them ready. And then last but not least, you got to ensure the work is getting done, right? At the end of the day, the best laid program without real work behind it isn't going to see success. Okay, reason number 3, you might be stuck in the fitness industry is that your coaching isn't connecting. Now, I'm really going down memory lane here today, guys. But, I think back to my first 3 jobs, right? First job, Ball State. Second job, rehab in Fort Wayne. Third job, in-home training in Indy. Throughout those first 8 years, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I was a great trainer, right? I was not a great trainer. X's and O's, coaching, cueing, program design. I was very much in my infancy. I've really only been doing this 8 years, and I don't expect anybody to be an expert in their first 10 years in the industry, let alone in their first 5. So here's what I did well. And I've talked about this before, but I think this message needs to be repeated time and time and time again. The reason I was successful early on is because I made people feel hurt. And that opened so many doors and allowed me to become a great coach. So when you walk into somebody's life, right? When you're working with the Division I volleyball player who is a freshman, she's away from home, maybe adjusting to not playing for the first time ever in her career, you can have a great conversation with that person. When you're talking to a rehab patient and this person is dealing with chronic back pain, it's impacting them at every level of their life, from their ability to do their job, to do the hobbies that they enjoy, or maybe just spend time with their kids. When you hear them and you make them feel like heard and seen, that is such an empowering thing. Same thing when I'm going into people's homes. I mean, that's an even more intimate environment. You got to find ways to connect. So I'm going to ask you right now, if you're not connecting, right? If you don't feel like you've really got great synergy with your clients, here's a very simple question to ask yourself. What are you doing to really connect with your clients? And that's not something I can answer for you. And it may be a case-by-case basis. But I think one of the goals that you should have is to know as much as you possibly can about the people you work with. And so some easy areas that you can check the box on, right? Their significant other, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, doesn't matter. Their significant other, kids. If somebody has kids, they love to talk about their kids. Like, I'm a pretty quiet person. You can't tell because I've got a podcast and I do all the things that I do. But trust me, like if we're just sitting back chilling, I don't feel the need to talk all the time. But I don't know why. Somebody asked me about my kids and I can't shut up. So people love to talk about their kids. Depending on the person, some people really like to talk about their work. Obviously, I'm passionate about my job, but maybe it's something you can talk about their work or their career. Hobbies is a huge one, right? Some people hate their job. And so that's where you talk about hobbies, and the question that I always come back to, something that will really be a great trigger for you, is when you ask them about something, what really lights them up? And so then I started thinking about all of the people that I've worked with over the years, right? And so I start thinking about, especially when I did in-home, because that's a long hour, my friend. That's a long hour. If you're training somebody one-on-one for an hour in their home, maybe it's super early, they're not even awake yet. I learned about so many random topics over this 3-year period, right? I had clients that were super interested in woodworking. One guy was super into cigars. Many of them were into wine because they were generally pretty affluent. Some of them were obsessed with jewelry, right? So all kinds of different jewelry. They had friends that were jewelers, gardening, music. I just learned about so many different topics. One guy was obsessed with the Dallas Mavericks. So we'd talk about the Dallas Mavericks and I'd keep up on what's going on with the Mavs. Did they win? Did they lose? One of the best things that you can do in these environments is, once you know what they're excited about or they're passionate about, start asking more open-ended questions. Don't ask questions that can end in a yes or a no. Ask them, well, how do you feel about that? There's so many different ways you can craft a question to where they have to expand on it a little bit more. And it can't just be like a yes, no, I guess, whatever, find ways to engage them. But on the flip side of this, once you figured out things that they're excited about, things that you can talk about, things that you can connect or bond over, then this is important, guys. You have to actually care about them and that the answers that they give, right? So you find you become invested in the things that they're invested in. And I still remember, again, thinking back to 2005 to 2008, I didn't even drink wine at the time. But this one guy, literally, he, had an entire wine cellar. He was super excited about it. He read Wine Spectator magazine. And so one time I went over, I think it was his son's 17th or 18th birthday. So we went over, he's like, oh, you got to try this wine. And so I'm like, hey man, well, explain this to me. He's like, oh, that's a 50-year port. I'm like, oh, okay, it sounds great, dude. But he's so excited about it. So explain to me, why is this a big deal? What does it taste like? What do you do? How do you, get your palate prepped? I don't know. Again, I'm still not a hardcore wine person, but just showing enthusiasm and the things that excite me really bonded me with this guy. And so he went from, oh yeah, we got to work out, to, he was never the most excited guy, but he would be excited for me to show up because he knew, hey, we're going to have some great discussion. We're going to work hard and we're going to get a little bit fitter. So, just understand that when we're talking about coaching, right? coaching goes beyond the X's and O's and the hard skills. There's a soft skill environment or a soft skill element here that you've got to be locked in on. So you have to ask yourself, how can you really connect with this person on a human level first? Because sometimes it's not going to be the X's and O's or the amazing program that you write for them that wins them over. It's going to be the connection, right? And the fact that they really feel like you care about them that starts to move the needle in your relationship. So once you can figure that out, I promise everything will be easier. Okay? Okay, reason number 4, you might be feeling stuck in the fitness industry. You feel like you're on an island. So when I moved to Fort Wayne, it's 2002. It's December of 2002. I'll give you the exact time. So December 2002, I had graduated in May of 2002, and I'd gone basically 6 months trying to find this job. Again, mailing my resume all over the United States. I think I went from everywhere from Oregon to Nebraska, maybe like George Washington. Anywhere there was a collegiate S&C gig, I put my resume out there, and I got none of them. So first real job is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I remember I move up. Jess and I were both living with our respective parents at the time. And so I move up, move into my apartment, and literally the first week on the job was the worst. Like, it was the worst week ever because Jess hadn't moved up yet. I got like an ear infection, and I had swimmer's ear, so I couldn't hear. And the 3 girls that were like the, not office managers, but like the office assistants at the time were very cliquey. And I'm the new person, and they made me feel absolutely horrible. Now, there's a happy ending here because it took me a couple weeks, but your boy broke them down, and we all became good friends. But man, that first week really sucked, right? And so I kind of felt like I was on an island. Over the course of some of that time, I kind of had a contentious relationship with my boss. It's Fort Wayne, so there's not exactly this thriving hotbed of strength and conditioning or physical culture going on up there. And so there were just times where I really felt like I was on my own, right? I'd go to work, I'd put in my shift, I'd do my powerlifting training. Whenever I could, I'd go to my favorite coffee shop, the Espresso Gallery. It was awesome. But I'd go to the Espresso Gallery and I would crank out articles. This is when I started writing a lot for T Nation because, again, I just felt like kind of on my own, right? I had all these thoughts and I wanted to bounce training ideas off people, and there was nobody there. And so lo and behold, this other young aspiring writer starts connecting with me. His name is Eric Cressy. And he's like, man, I really like your work. And I'm like, dude, I love your work. So we start collaborating. We start going back and forth. And I'm like, man, this is what I needed. I just needed somebody else who was as excited about strength and conditioning and about fitness as I am to bounce ideas off of. And obviously, pretty happy ending there, right? We co-authored, dozens of articles together, co-created numerous products, spoke at the same seminars. Like, that's my guy. But if it feels like you're on an island as a trainer or coach, you got to ask yourself, well, how can I fix that? You can sit in the doldrums and you can pout and be upset about it, or you can figure out real strategies to get yourself out of this little funk. And I'm going to start with a solution that I know is taboo in this day and age, but attend an in-person seminar or workshop. I'm going to say it again. It's taboo. If you feel like you're on your own or you got nobody else to talk to about fitness, attend a real live in-person seminar or workshop. So back in the day, Perform Better was the jam. You could go there for an entire weekend. You get like this smorgasbord of awesome presenters. It's Gray Cook and Mike Boyle and Alan Cosgrove and Stu McGill. I mean, it was just such an amazing event. But even better than the presenters were all the amazing people you were surrounded by. Because, man, if I would go to Chicago, there'd be hundreds and hundreds of other fitness people. And even if I only saw them once a year, that was enough, right? Hey, man, how are you doing? What are you doing in your training now? Like, that live in-person experience would just elevate you. It would lift you back up. It was like nourishment for the soul. And this was reaffirmed to me because I've started doing more in-person events again here lately. And every time I go to one, I'm like, man, I kind of remember why this industry is so great. Joel and I just did our workshop in Vegas, and we had 30 amazing coaches there, and they were all focused on getting better. They wanted to write better programs. They wanted to educate themselves on coaching. They want to help their clients and athletes live happier and healthier lives. So if you feel like you're on an island, do the simplest thing. find an in-person workshop or event to attend. Now, there's other things that you can do here too. You can find an online training community. I don't even know what that looks like these days, but back in my day, we had forums and that sort of thing where you could go and interact with other people. T Nation was a great hub because you could read an article and then there was discussions beneath it. You could take a course, right? Again, shameless plug, Complete Coach Cert. Not only do you get the cert, but then you get back-end access to our circle group where you're surrounded by other coaches who have gone through the cert and they're there to help, right? It's been funny here lately because people have been asking questions, and as you can tell, I'm still fighting this plague, but I went like a week where I wasn't on the circle group and there were people asking questions and other coaches were already filling in answers for me. So you need a community, right? Like that's something I always come back to. You need a coaching community. So I think a mix of online, offline is the way to go. Other things, you can seek out a mentor. This is something that I can't recommend highly enough. If you feel lost, if you feel like you've done a lot of the basic foundational stuff, it may be time to find somebody that's not just one notch, but 2 or 3 notches ahead of where you are that can really look at the 30,000 foot view and tell you, hey, my friend, this is where you're at. These are the steps you need to take to continue to ascend and grow in your fitness career. So you can seek out a mentor. You can join a mastermind group. There's still some amazing mastermind groups out there. And when I was coming up, I was lucky. I got to go to a lot of Pat's mastermind events. Man, there's nothing better than you're sitting in a room for 2 days with other motivated fitness pros. You are going to walk out of there a better coach or a better business owner. So when you think about it, your ultimate goal should be to get into better rooms, right? And the saying is, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around, right? And so that's why when people say, well, who do you, I don't even want to say look up to anymore, because I would like to think we're at fairly similar levels, but who do I want to spend the most time with? Who do I want to associate with? There's a reason on this podcast, I'm always talking about a Joel, a Luca, an Andy, a Pat, Eric Cressy, Bill Hartman. I'm always seeking out good people to be around, because when I'm around those people, it inspires me to be better, right? That should be your goal. Your goal should be to get into better rooms so you're ultimately around better people, because that will lift you up as a coach. So to recap, online, it can help, right? You can find online communities that will absolutely help you and that may make you feel a little bit more of the warm and tingly on the inside so you don't feel like you're on an island. But I think you also need to find a balance between offline and online, right? You need to find those times where you can physically go to a workshop, go to a seminar, go to a live event, and be around people who are switched on. Now, I realize it's going to take more time, but the end result is always worth it. Last but not least, you don't feel like you're getting better, right? So reason number 5 is you feel like you're not getting better. And it's interesting here because for 13 years, we had employees at iFast, and for 12 and a half of those, we had interns. And it started off as I had to do all of the intern interviews. And then the longer I did this, I started to let our coaches do this, right? So in the early days, it was Jay. And man, I miss Jay. He was such an awesome dude. So if anybody hears this and knows who Jay is, tell him Mike loves him, thinks the world of him, and hopefully you guys can give Jay Chung a shout out because he was awesome. But Jay kind of started this, and then Eric did some, Dave did some, but there was this definite shift when we were interviewing interns. And it went from, hey, a very simple question we would ask is, well, who do you learn from, right? What books are you reading? What coaches do you follow? And so you could kind of tell over time, this started to shift, and it started getting away from what books are you reading? What courses have you attended? What coaches do you follow? And then it just became, I get on social media for continuing education. And so I'm going to make this very clear. And I don't know how I can be any more direct. I'm just going to say it. Social media is not continuing education. Second time, social media is not continuing education. Is it inspiring at times? Sure. Does it give you some great ideas? Sure. But continuing education, that's a strong hell no, my friend. All social media is entertainment, right? It's there to entertain us, engage us. Maybe it gives us some ideas and some things to try out in the gym, but it's not going to truly move the needle for us as a trainer or coach. All it can do, if it's doing things what I would perceive to be the right way, is if I give you a strong message on social media, that makes you think, I like this guy. I want to learn more from him. So I'm going to come out of his social media ecosystem and I'm going to go listen to his podcast or watch his videos or maybe buy one of his products. Okay. So here's what I would suggest you do. If you don't feel like you're getting better, whether it's program design, coaching, assessments, whatever hard skills we're talking about, your job is you need to treat yourself like you are a client or athlete. Always come back to training as an analogy, right? So if a new client comes in, what do? Well, you ask yourself, what's your vision for this person? So now let's just flip that around. What's your vision for yourself as a coach? What kind of coach do you want to be? How do you aspire, or how do you see yourself in the future? Number 2, where are you currently at? Like, what do you do well? What are your strengths? On the flip side, what are your weaknesses? Where do you want to go? Right? If you do, train X population and you want to train Y, how do you get from A to B? So that's where you start to ask yourself, okay, what gaps are there in your development that help you move that needle? And so this is one of the things that in my program design mentorship, a lot of coaches have discussed is they feel like they're really confident working in a gen pop environment. So they're working with 30, 40, 50-year-olds, but maybe they want to start working with more athletes and they don't understand the differences between training gen pop and training athletes. Or maybe they train gen pop clients, but they're just doing, standard bodybuilding type stuff, and they want to train them in a more athletic or more longevity focused fashion. So that's why a lot of people actually come to that mentorship, is because I kind of guide them through that process. So you have to ask yourself, hey, what are my gaps? Right? So it's just like training, guys. Can you start to imagine how this looks and feels? These are the same things you do when you intake or onboard a new client. Then you have to ask yourself, okay, I've identified my gaps or I've identified my weaknesses. Now you have to ask, well, who can help me fill those gaps? Right? And this is where social can help, right? So if I'm looking for somebody that's talking about speed, man, I'm going to find Lee Taft. I'm going to find my guy, Ryan Patrick, another guy, Justin Moore. I'm sure there's tons and tons of people out there that I'm not thinking of right out of the gate. Les Spellman. There's tons of amazing speed coaches. Jonas Dudu. Those are all people that I would look up to and respect in the speed space. If we're talking about conditioning, go find Joel. If we're talking about strength, there's probably hundreds of people out there. But this is where social can help. So you identify your weaknesses or areas you want to improve. Then you go to social and you say, who are some people that I want to follow? Track them for a little while. See what their message is. See if what they're saying makes sense. Figure out who they've trained, right? This is a big one because I want to follow people that have actually gotten real world results. They're not just creating sexy, curated content on IG or TikTok. But now you start to figure out, okay, hey, these three people, I really jive with. I really resonate with them. Now I'm going to go and, go to one of their courses, or I'm going to listen to more of their podcasts, or I'm going to attend a workshop that they host. All right. And then the last piece is once you found those people, you have to ask yourself, well, what is my commitment? Or what kind of commitment is it going to take to get better? Right? Because it can't just be identifying, I like these people and I'm going to kind of just follow them now. No, there has to be deeper levels of commitment. You got to take those next steps. And so one of the things that I always come back to, if I'm trying to learn a new topic, and this is something that's made a huge impact for me over the years, so I would really impress upon you, if you want to get better at something, please try it like this. I think learning requires context. And so, well over a decade now when I realized, hey man, I want to be a great overall physical preparation coach. I don't want to be known as just a strength coach. I want to coach athletes. And so I determined that speed and conditioning were two of my biggest weaknesses. And conditioning, for whatever reason, I could kind of check the box on that. But with speed, it was hard because I was consuming all of Lee's stuff, but I was doing it at the worst possible time because I was doing it when I didn't have athletes in to work with. So I'm consuming all this stuff, but there's no context there. And so I would really strongly impress upon you, if you want to learn something, don't just learn it, but find ways to apply it as quickly as possible. So the sequence that I like to take is I'm going to consume something. So I'm going to learn it, I'm going to apply it, and then I'm going to turn around and I'm going to teach it. So it's three steps. Learn, apply, teach, or coach. Learn, apply, teach, or coach. And so what this does is when you learn it, right, you start to internalize it. When you turn around and apply it with an athlete, you can really kind of put a filter on it and see what works, what resonates with you, what things do you like, what do you dislike. So you start to put your own coaching stamp on it. And then the final piece here is when you then turn around and teach it to somebody else, now you start to exhibit true mastery over something. Now, what's also interesting about this is I think one of the best compliments that I've gotten or received over the years is that people say, Mike, you make stuff easy to follow. You make it easy to understand. And man, first off, I truly appreciate that because that's something I've always strove. That's something I've always tried to do in my content is I want my content to be easy to understand. But the only reason I've been able to do that is because I've taken, in many cases, months and years really mulling over these topics and ruthlessly applying it to figure out what works and trying to figure out the best ways to explain it to others to where it makes sense. But I think that's something you need to do, right? If you really want to own these topics, if you really want to become a master, you have to take this approach of learn it, apply it, and then teach it or coach it. So to kind of put a bow on this one, just remember, social media is not continuing education. It's a great way to learn about other coaches, maybe find inspiration, find new ideas. But if you really want to level up, it starts with determining where you're at, where you want to go, and you got to create a game plan. Just like you create a training program for your client or athlete that wants to get faster, get stronger, shed body fat. You create a training program, same thing for you. Create a training program that's going to help you move from A to B. And if you can do that, I guarantee do that time and time and time again with enough topics, and you will be a truly masterful coach in this industry. So to bring this all together, 5 reasons that you might be feeling stuck. Number 1, you're not making enough money. We talked about this. Hey, if you're underpaid, better bring your guns blazing and be able to explain to your boss or your clients or your athletes why you deserve more. If not, it's your job to increase your value as a coach so that you can get up to where you want to be. Number 2, your programs aren't getting results. Well, remember, are your programs congruent with your client's goals? If they are, ask yourself, take a step back. Is the client ready for the program that you've given them? And if not, you may need to do some prep work before you get into that main program. Number 3, your coaching isn't connecting. And this is where it comes full circle. Are you really invested in this person? Have you found a way to forge a bond that goes beyond the 4 walls of the gym? Have you started to really figure out what drives them as a human being? What are their passions? What things make them excited? What light them up? Because once you can start to connect with somebody on things outside of fitness, it's going to make your job that much easier when they come in the gym and they are trying to work on their fitness. Number 4, you feel like you're on an island. Very simple here, my friend. You can't live in a bubble. You can't just get on the internet and hope that that is the one way to learn and connect in the fitness space. Go to a live event, go to a workshop, find a mentor, join a mastermind group, find ways to cultivate both online and offline connection so you never feel like you're on your own. And then last but not least, you don't feel like you're getting better. Remember, social media ain't it. Sorry, social media is not continuing education. It might be a gateway or a conduit, but it's not the thing. If you're not getting better, you got to do an honest analysis of where you're at, where you want to go. You got to create a game plan to help you get from A to B. So my friend, really hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, still fighting this death plague. I feel like I'm on the back end of it. I really just sound bad at this point. But if you enjoyed this show, please do me a favor. Maybe share it on social. Could be Facebook, X or Twitter, Threads or IG. If you're doing the latter, Threads and IG, tag me at Rob Train Systems. I love to know that you're enjoying the content, and I love to just kind of reshare it as well, just to amplify the message and let more people know that we're out here. If you enjoyed it, you don't want to do the social thing, email it to a friend, a fellow athlete, trainer, coach, gym owner, anybody that you feel like needs to hear the message. If you share it with them, that would be greatly appreciated. And then last but not least, if you're not already subscribed to the show, what are you doing, my friend? No reason to wait. Every week, I'm trying to drop great content that will truly help you become the best trainer or coach possible. So wherever you consume podcasts like this one, could be Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, go there right now, hit the follow or subscribe button so you know each and every week when a new episode drops. So my friend, as always, thank you so much for your support. Love and appreciate you. And we'll be back next week with our next episode. Take care.